Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Experience Analytics. It's day three in the Big Brother house, Andy.
And you still haven't been evicted. I'm surprised.
Charming. I'm Natalie Williams.
And I'm Andy Gould.
And welcome back to those of you who have been with us all week, and welcome to those new faces that are just joining us today. If you're new to the Experience Analytics virtual world, we're talking about analytics client challenges and the solutions that go with them. So, what's on the agenda today, Andy?
Today's all about data governance. But before you turn off your video screens, in our recent Deloitte surveys, data governance is still in the top 5 priorities for every organisation. It's about getting the data journey right, and it isn't about policing.
Yeah, it's a massive misconception that data governance has to be all about control. It can also help drive value in the organisation. And that's why we've got Nationwide and Informatica here to talk to us today.
Thank you, Andy and Natalie. We're in a period of change in the data marketplace and governance team at Nationwide, and I'd like to take you through the journey so far. For several years, we have received many demand requests through multiple inception points. Requests for data governance team to support either strategic transformation programs or local small data change initiatives. We had adopted a waterfall approach of delivering siloed data management services to business users. We would start with data analysis. We would run through to look at business glossary, capturing definitions. We would map out data lineage. We would then proceed to engage our data stewards and data owners and SMEs. From that, we would do some data profiling once we'd sourced data. We'd use those insights to then build scorecards and develop and present a final scorecard. So, having taken a step to just look for solutions and remedies, we worked together and started to explore a more integrated end-to-end delivery vehicle to explore new ways of working that would bring team members together and provide development and cross-skill opportunities, thus future-proofing our delivery output and creating a resilient and flexible operating model. We designed cross-functional pods with a central data marketplace and governance team, incepting demand, triaging and prioritising. Through our waterfall approach, we observed a number of factors against our service offering, the impact that our service delivery model was having on our team members, as well as surfacing some key challenges. Our biggest goal was to shift our ways of working and break down those barriers that we had actually established ourselves within our data marketplace and governance team. Our goal to explore new ways of working has directed us to focus on people, process and technology. By removing local silos, we want to champion a culture of healthy challenge and continuous improvement, bringing team members together, sharing their knowledge and expertise. We want to increase pace and speed of delivery to support our business users with the data insights that they require. This journey hopes to increase the understanding of the value of data and truly treating data as an enterprise asset. Through our planning and shaping, from our new ways of working and our experiment, we recognise the importance of cross-skilling and training. We designed a new framework to run in phases, which would kickstart our governance team end-to-end partnering journey. We began focusing in on our key pinch points, such as resourcing challenges, where we identified that we needed to upskill more data quality specialists to cope with demand. This brought us to phase 1. We brought our metadata, data quality, master and reference data teams together to form a data governance operations group. We assembled small cohort groups and built a data quality focused training plan, starting with the training of our metadata management team specialists with DQ processes and technology. In phase 2, to which we're running in parallel, we are working to bring our data governance operations teams together with our data governance and policy, risk and controls team, encouraging wider knowledge share and experience within the team. We then looked at the training package and elements required to support our team journey to end-to-end data governance partnering and delivery, and we reviewed what toolkit we would like our teams to have. We focus on a blended toolkit of training, covering a range of core technical skills and training, the practical application of those services, softer skills, and linked to our Phase 3 cross-skill training plan, introduced interesting industry topic areas such as cloud governance and machine learning. Softer skills are equally important and help us collaborate better. Working on relationship management, stakeholder engagement, they are so key to understanding business requirements and helping to leverage the value of data and drive real benefit. Having gone through the journey and key shift change away from waterfall approach, we are now realigned. I'd like to introduce our new data governance team pods. We now have operational delivery pods in place covering key delivery areas for us. We designed supporting principles for pods, including the role of a pod lead. Think of it as a delivery manager, responsible for managing demand and allocating out the pod team members, utilising the data marketplace and governance leadership team for those challenges of demand, escalation, triaging, and also risk raising. Jira has also been adopted to help manage the backlog and drive better progress reporting and dashboards, and will be there to help the pod leads look at how their team are progressing. Worth pausing for a moment to review our journey and look at the goals we have set ourselves, which will guide us to better value, sooner, safer, happier outcomes. BVSSH. Better, we want to leverage cognitive diversity and encourage a continuous improvement mindset. Value, improve BAU delivery and drive optimization opportunities. Sooner, increase pace, efficiency and flow. Safer, have an environment where we can test, learn and fail. It's okay, it's about trying new things. And happier, create a culture of co-creation and experimentation. Looking towards the horizon now, what are we hoping to achieve? Well, we hope to create a sense of one team, one vision, one purpose, supporting personal development journeys. We want to evolve and align our governance service offering to business strategic objectives and real true value delivery. We'd like to explore and develop further alignment with enterprise architecture and our analytics teams. We'd like to run more discovery proof of concepts and explore data democratization. We also would like to kickstart more discovery use cases, focusing in on wider integration of tooling. So to recap, it's worth exploring how you might bring your own teams together to deliver better value, help to create a thriving, engaging working environment where ultimately teams understand the value and the context of what they are delivering and why. Now I'll hand over to Irena French. Thank you, Irena.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, so good metadata and why do we love it? Now, any business that is created, it's created to provide services or to provide products to their customers, to the members, to really all of us to make our lives easier. As a financial organization, Nationwide Building Society builds products. Now the products that are built, they are financial products. Financial product, in effect, is an information asset. So to build any information asset, you obviously need a data. If you haven't got the data, you haven't got a product, therefore you haven't got a business. If we look at that from the other side now, what if we have too much data? How do we handle that? So too much data can make us get lost in the amount of it, in the sheer amount of it, as not understanding what that data is, where to find the best data source for the, say, new product development, or for the possibly the regulatory report that we need. And that's where the good metadata comes in. So the good metadata will show us where the source starts, where it is, where the data originates. The good metadata will also show us where the data resides at point in time after it moved from the source. It will also explain us, and the definition should be clear enough to explain us what that data is. So I not necessarily need to be an expert in a particular business area or SME in the technical area to understand what that data is if a definition is right. Now it's also shows us, well, how does that data travel through the landscape? Well, what are we using? What methods of transportation are needed for that particular piece of data to travel from the source into the target? We also need to understand, and that's what the good metadata will show you, so which direction is it going, where it will be used. Is it going to be used by technical areas? Is it needed for operational areas? Or is that will be used somewhere in the business areas? And which ones? The other thing that the good metadata will show you is also where that data is changed. Where does that transformation happen? Because the data to build a new product, to optimize, to actually run the operation, you will be needing to manipulate the data in whatever way it's needed for that particular purpose. Now, the good metadata will also show you, so who owns the actual data that is mapped or associated with that metadata. So who are the owners who will make decision on how the data is used, how it is protected. Also, it will show the data stewards. So data stewards, in our case, Nationwide, data stewards are people who understand the change. They are responsible for that change. They are experts of that particular change. The good metadata will also show you who are the SMEs, in case we need to contact them for more detail, where the just metadata level information is not necessarily supports or explains to us what we need to know. So that will show the SMEs who work with the data day to day, who are trusted by their data stewards to do the job, to do the change. Then also the good metadata and well-defined metadata will suggest, well, what the data will be used for, what it is suitable for. Will it be used by people, by our colleagues, possibly for their manual operations or manual activities? Will the data be used, for example, by the tools that have a machine learning capability or artificial intelligence capability? Because for that, the data would be transformed in a particular way, possibly. So all that information that I just summarized of a metadata, we could get all that just by looking at the good, well-defined metadata, well-mapped metadata, without needing to access actual data. Now, for those who worked in the industry for quite a long time and when the metadata wasn't a thing, or was fairly neglected for quite a while, you would have been in the situation where, for example, you need to do some kind of scoping, you need to do a gap analysis, and you would actually need to go and access the data. That would mean that you most likely would need the SME resource. You most likely need numerous access to a variety of the systems. Now, especially when dealing with, say, sensitive data, you would most likely, as close as possible, you would get only to the masked data, again, which would complicate the analysis. So having a really good, well-defined metadata would actually show you at least who you need to contact, where you need to go, what SMEs you need to work with, and cutting months and months of work. So really to just summarize that the good metadata is fundamental for absolutely any work stream, any activity in the data governance, in the data maintenance, in data change, and in data management areas. So as I said, so good metadata is fundamental for all work streams, all the activities in the data governance, data management, in change, in maintenance, and in the usage agenda. So it's just to put from another perspective, metadata is like having a good map when you're stranded in a jungle. So if your map is clear, if you can see clearly the pictures, if you can see the paths, if you can see the directions, if you can see from the definitions which exits are dangerous, you most likely will choose the direction, and you will choose it on your own terms. You will decide when you want to leave a jungle, which exit you want to take. Now, if you have a blurry map or map that is overloaded with information, with the broken paths, you don't really know which exit leads where, you most likely will be stranded in that jungle for quite a while trying to find the exit. And if you stumble on the right exit, it will be a nice surprise. You most likely in a business would be asking for somebody to rescue you from that situation, and that rescue would be quite costly, which is obviously it's not the best option when we are trying to optimize, when we are trying to implement the dynamic changes, and when we are trying to move efficiently and effectively. Now, how are we getting there? How are we trying to achieve the good metadata definition, and how to get most value of that metadata? So I know that most of you now most likely thinking, okay, so we do need the business requirements, clear business requirements. Yes, absolutely, we need the business requirements because without the business we wouldn't need to do all these activities. Now, the other thing that quite often pop up, that we need a good senior stakeholder support. Absolutely, it's really important to have a support from a senior stakeholder, especially when you're working on the bigger projects, especially when you deliver, say, changes as part of the optimization work. Now, and you absolutely need good tools, because the tools will speed up, will make everything more efficient and effective. But from my experience, even having the best tools, even having the best support and the best requirements, what you actually need, you need the good operational team. When I say good operational team, is a team which is diverse, which has lots of its breadth and width of experience. The team that is built is like a little micro world around us. If we're delivering a product to a real world, we try to create a mini world within the operational team that would be a representation of that real world, because that way we can get views, opinions and ideas that are more realistic. So Nationwide runs lots of initiatives, and we're working with apprenticeship schemes, we're working with graduate schemes. We have lots of colleagues who join the society directly from the school, and they grow, they develop in the business, they learn on the job while doing their job, and they become experts of a particular area. Now, all that combined knowledge allows us to build the products, and what allows also to reuse the features that are within the existing tools, which is extremely important now, especially in the place we are now with a COVID situation, where we can't really go and innovate. We need to learn, and we need to reuse as much as possible what we have. So it's just from the experience as well, why that diversity in the experience is very important. So anyone who comes with less experience, they usually generate the ideas, more unspoiled ideas, more unrestricted ones. With experience, unfortunately, we usually become more skeptical at looking at the things, because we experienced more failures during our careers, during our lives. And I just always remember the example in one of our teams. We were trying to resolve one of the problems where we wanted to incorporate the technical data into the way we manage our business data. And one of the ideas that came out from our apprentice and from another colleague who worked at Nationwide for quite a long time, however, not necessarily had university degree, and they looked at it and said, well, actually, we could use this feature for that. And they sat down, stepped back, and were thinking, well, why not? That feature wasn't designed for that particular resolution of that particular problem, but it was perfectly good. It's a bit like, if I buy the ironing board, for example, well, why do I need to use just for ironing? If I need to use it as a coffee table, who says no? So, and that's how those ideas, those discoveries, they kind of sometimes just pop up, and we have loads of them. The experience comes in when we need to pick out those ideas, and we need to look at, so which of those ideas could be turned into a practical solution, into a workable solution that will be built and will deliver value for the society and therefore value for our members. And when you join those two worlds together, the experience, that difference in experience, you end up with optimal solutions that reused functionality, not necessarily built on the top of something that was already there. And you will get much more solid, more rounded product that also would be more suitable for the real world. Now, we have a thing why it is really important to have diverse teams. It's because operational team, they literally sit between the technical world and the business world. The people who work on the operational teams, they are a hybrid, they have a hybrid knowledge set. So they can easily communicate with the technical areas because they have, in some cases, really deep understanding because they possibly worked in those areas. They also understand the business well because, again, majority of the team most likely had experience working within the business areas. So they can understand and they can provide the insights and on kind of how those two worlds can be connected. We will also, while working with the technical colleagues and with the business colleagues, what we usually highlighting is that if we were to change something in the technical place, well, that will definitely impact something on the business world, and it can even end up being us producing, for example, the report that would be going out to the outside the society and might be wrong. So by having well-defined metadata and the team who actually has really close link with the technical business areas and team that not necessarily operate everything but educate the people as well, because as Sam mentioned, we are moving to the self-serve model where for everyone to be able to access the metadata, to be able to read the metadata and use it for their purposes. So transparency, alignment, and really close cooperation between the technology, between the operational, and between the business teams already deliver value. And just a couple of examples of that, how it works. So a few months ago we had two exercises that we ran in parallel. One of them was the financial controls team, and the other was the outside audit team, who were they had a set of objectives that we need to meet. So the way we approached it, their objectives became our objectives, because that is the only way to work and the only way to get the best value. Break silos, work together. The approach that we took, that we explained to our audit team how our metadata works, how is it mapped, what information you can retrieve from that metadata, and what it meant that we cut out lots of unnecessary running around looking through the data, through the actual data. We retrieved as much information as was possible from the metadata, did the analysis, and the audit team were able to have a look. They understood what sources they needed to test, what targets they needed to test, who they needed to contact. We ended up completing that activity with time to spare. Therefore, we were able to run the activity literally from auditing from the actual source to the actual target system. So we were very pleased that all the tests were passed, showing that our data is solid and can be trusted. Now, the other activity that I mentioned was running in parallel was from our financial controls team. So what the financial controls team were looking at, well, do we have any gaps? Is there, for example, when the projects or bigger activities, optimization, say, activities are happening, it's usually any product, any output would be handed over to the, say, BAU teams, but not necessarily followed through. So all that good stuff that just been worked on, all that good product that was delivered by a project, if not maintained, it just will lose its value through the time. So the financial control teams, they are establishing the right controls and looking and making sure that that doesn't happen. So again, by us introducing them and working with them closely on the metadata level, they were able to see straight away where they wanted to ask the questions, where they thought there were gray areas. Now, for us, how it benefited us, it was, okay, so if people are looking at the mapping of our metadata, at the definitions of our metadata, and we still have questions, we need to make sure we fix that. Because in some cases, yes, if there would be a gap, it possibly would be valid. But if we don't define the data in a way that users can understand it and have to kind of double ask the question on something, we need to improve that. And we did lots of that uplift, lots of improving, to the point that the financial controls team were able to see and clearly understand the picture, and we were happy with the control setup. So that is how good metadata, having good teams, having the end-to-end view, broken silos, and easily accessible by everyone, well-defined metadata can join up and can deliver the value for all of us. And Sri, it is over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Arina. Good morning, everybody. My name is Srikant Kantadai. I'm with the Data and Analytics practice at Deloitte in the UK. We've just heard Nationwide talk about their data governance journey. I'd like to share with you our views on where we see the changes in data governance, where we see data governance or governance in a broader context go in today's data-centric world. We all talk about data centricity and how has this impacted the traditional aspects of governance. If you look at today's corporate organizations, we hear a variety of buzzwords: data democratization, data as an asset, data trust, data modernization, data centricity, data driven. These are words that are being bandied about in today's organization. But in reality, what does this mean to our day-to-day business? What does it mean in reality is really the question. And how does this impact governance? If you look at data is now being seen as an asset and not a commodity. People are assigning a value to data. There is a monetary value that is being assigned to various components of data. And when data has monetary value, there are some needs that impact governance beyond the traditional way. Traditionally, governance was all about business definitions, data quality metrics, data privacy, and so on. But when you assign a monetary value, like you do with currency, everything from where you get the data, how do you store it, how do you transmit the data, how is it being shared across in terms of what is allowed, what is not allowed from a privacy point of view, how is the data how long is it retained, and how is it disposed of at the end of the life cycle, become very key factors. This applies to data both at rest and in transit. And this is a key change that we are seeing in the governance approaches today, given the fact that data now has a monetary value. Data, information, asset. The right data in the right format, in the right quality, gives you information, which when you exploit becomes an asset. You can see a simple example here, how there's a binary set of data, a binary representation of data. Again, the next picture showing you how it looks in a decimal format. And when you apply your metadata formatting, you can then see it is a sort code and bank detail. Now that, while transmitting, again, you may want to mask some parts of the data to ensure privacy. And this is very traditional today. But in a data-centric world, or in a world where we have assigned monetary value to data and it is an asset, two factors become important in addition. The first is who uses the data. And the second thing is, what is it used for? To draw a parallel with currency, the government or the banks look at how currency is printed, how it is dispersed among the population, how it is used for transactions, how do people hold it, and when currency notes become old, how do they retrieve it and dispose it. But the government also looks at who is using the money and for what purpose. You would expect people to use currency for normal business transactions. But when people use it for illegal purposes like money laundering or whatever else, then there are governance or there are regulations put into place to prevent that. And that is exactly what is happening with data today. In addition to all your traditional approaches of how you manage data, definitions, lineage, and so on, we are now looking at who are the users of data and what is the data being used for. This is a very key differentiator in today's data-centric world. Traditional approaches, we looked at accountability, we looked at strategy, we looked at policies, and we looked at monitoring data. And we looked at things like definition, we looked at sharing, we looked at data quality, metadata, and so on. But the new norm adds a few more aspects to this. The new norm adds things like usage, retention, disposal, privacy, and the movement of data in terms of being governed. These are what are now being focused on by a lot of the organizations who value their data and who see it as an asset to drive their business. This is the major shift that we see today. We always heard this term, data is owned by the business. But what we shouldn't forget is that it is managed by IT. It is managed by IT in the various applications in your IT landscape. We hear the word privacy by design when people talk about regulations like GDPR. To me, we now need to be looking at governance by design. Governance by design is not just having the basic metadata, the basic business definitions and the rules, but when somebody is designing your IT landscape or your IT applications, look at what data is going to be captured, in what format, What is it going to be used for? Where will it be populated to? Who will be the consuming apps? How will you transmit it? What amount of data do you need to transmit? Do you transmit all the attributes or part of it? And again, what are the privacy methods? And you also look at who are the users and what they're using it for. This is now becoming the new norm, which is driving the whole concept around data as an asset, data having a monetary value in a data-centric world. I would now hand over to Andy Joss, my colleague from Informatica, who will give you his views on where he sees data governance in today's data-centric world. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shri. Hopefully, like me, you'll have got some great information and some great insights into how Nationwide are taking data governance forward and the journey that they're on. I don't know about you, but I always listen to these sessions and think, well, what are the key learnings? What are the key takeaways I get from them? I think today there's been lots, but actually for me, I think there's probably 4 really key ones. The first one for me was listening to Sam talking about what she called the resilient operating model, about the fact that we're now embedding governance into the organization, about getting teams engaged around data governance because it's so materially beneficial for the organization and people are really understanding that benefit. But it's also about giving people the skills and the ability to be able to enable them to do the things that we need them to do. And it's just as important that we're focusing on the outcomes that the governance program is going to be delivering to us, enabling people to really understand the benefit of what they're doing. Another key takeaway for me was listening to Irena talking about the impact of data governance on the organization, about how it's bringing understanding and great insights across the business. To me, it sounds like they're making better business decisions with that information. And one of the key areas of that was talking about the benefit of good metadata, how organizations can now use metadata to tell them things and give them insights and context they never would have had before or would have been too difficult to get otherwise. I also like listening to Shri talking about the role of data and data governance, where we are and why it's so important now. And this concept of data monetization, it has a value, and how governing data, when we're considering data in this way, becomes so critical to ensuring we do actually get value from data. And last but not least, this whole concept around the ways of working. We heard from Irena and Sam talking about where Nationwide have been, where they are, and more importantly, where they're going to. And it's very clear to me that Nationwide is on a journey, and most organizations around data governance will be on a journey. I think the really important points for me is on that journey is how do you take the people and the organization with you? Focusing on how data governance is going to make a difference. Focusing on how data governance is going to drive outcomes. Focusing on how data governance is going to give people the capabilities they need to be able to do their jobs better. For me, the concept now of thinking about the ways of working really embeds data governance into the organization to hopefully make it enduring and successful into the future. With that, I'll hand back to Andy and Nat.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, team. Really interesting presentation. Great to get under the skin of some of those data governance issues. We've had some questions come in, so let me find one to ask. Okay, let's start with an exploration around metadata. So you mentioned a bit more about your metadata use case on regulatory. Do you have any other instances that you can tell us about which talk about the value you can get from metadata outside of the regulatory example?
Okay, so I will refer back to the presentation a little bit. I touched on it. So we already started defining the technical metadata in a similar way we define the business metadata. And this will will benefit our IT community a lot, because at the moment they have a variety of documentation where they have to store that documentation in different areas. There are different ways of defining it, whereas if we use the same method of defining the technical metadata, keep it in the easily accessible place, it's easier, and it also introduces lots of efficiencies. Again, I am back to my optimization, but then also, so we already piloted and are in a process of reusing methods for defining business data usage rules for the technical world. So how that will help? It will help our architecture community, architecture colleagues to actually reinforce and strengthen consistency in data engineers' coding, configuration work, and also having an easily accessible and well-managed one point of reference will also help the data engineers themselves to deliver consistent outputs. They won't need to go looking for information somewhere, trying to trace the person who possibly holds that and updates that information. The information will be there and will be recorded in a very consistent and clear way. So when they're developing the code, they don't need to invent new names, invent new definitions, or they will also understand. So if that data element is called that and has a clear definition, they know, okay, so I will use it in my code, or possibly no, it's not suitable for that. So it's one. And from operational areas, so to strengthen our business as usual operation and to strengthen our governance, we already use the insights produced from the metadata management dashboards. Again, we have fairly good capability within our tool, so we can have a look and, okay, so we have a number of users who are using their data, and say, for example, quite often these users make errors that shows our quality assurance process, and possibly that area needs an extra training, or we see that there are some, say, system errors happening. So do we need to engage with our vendor, with our support teams to resolve them? All that is optimizing the way we're working, is making our work much more streamlined, and also end-to-end. We're working as a team, so if we need to improve some operational bit internally, we can apply those those improvements straight away, and also to access when we work really closely with vendors or our external support teams. Again, we can pinpoint what is wrong straight away, and that fix comes obviously much quicker and easier. Sam, do you?
And I think, as I touched on in my slides earlier, there's something about enriching our own team's journey with data, up that cross-skilling, upskilling. And for me, this is what, this resonates with our governance team members, working much more closely with our architecture and our data and analytics engineering team to really start to bring together the business metadata and understand the technical metadata that is layered. It's just now helping the teams really understand data lifecycle, and from that they can then discuss with business users and take them more on that journey.
And maybe there's something I'd just like to add to that. And I think what this, for me, is a fantastic example of is how people are using approaches like data governance to start to address one of the big challenges that large complex organizations have, which is around architectural complexity. Now, obviously, governance works between business and IT for obvious reasons. But if we can reduce that complexity and we can simplify and provide context that both technical teams and business teams and all the teams that support the business in other areas and on other projects, then ultimately the value of the data that we've got and the use of the data, whether it be for data engineering or other purposes, is going to go up. And the more value we get from data, actually from an organizational viewpoint, the more value that the organization gets. So I think it's a great example of how organizations can start to address architectural complexity. Shri, do you have a comment on that?
No, you really hit the nail on the head. And, it starts right at the beginning, the way you architect your applications, your landscape that enables more proactive and more robust governance of data. Ultimately, the aim is the same.
Thank you for that. Some really good insights around the metadata value that you are generating. But looking at some of the questions here, it's more turning to the business value and the business value you're returning that you've achieved so far and that you're aiming to achieve over the coming weeks and months. Any real examples you can give us today?
Thank you. So Broadly, we're seeking to drive value from our storytelling, and we need to improve our storytelling. And our end-to-end governance offering, and more closely aligned to our governance policies, controls, and risk frameworks, helps bring the true value of what we're delivering and the why. And from that, we can really help business users by guiding them through their data lifecycle and journey, provide examples, and explain if the governance isn't in place and aligned with that and overlaid with that, with their data usage and lifecycle, that what are the wider impacts to the business or to nationwide? What are the detrimental impacts of data risk? So our focus, I'd say, is to definitely grow the business users and their understanding around the importance and relevance of our governance service offering, which ultimately and importantly for us at Nationwide protects requirements and submissions. And for example, we're working, as you can imagine, we work very closely with internal and external auditors to take them through our data journeys and provide those lineage maps and overviews and take them through our operating model processes with the layers of governance and controls and risk framework. And we help them by showing and demonstrating, key data quality controls, for example, for compliance and regulatory submissions. And this process helps us to really cross-review our own service offering and our own controls framework, and to ensure that we're providing that right level of service and applying the right controls, importantly, at the right points as well. And this then drives, I feel, kind of like a cyclical value back to our governance team. So we're learning from that process as well. It's not just about, here you go, the auditors request something, let's show them X, we're done. No. We need to learn from it and grow and enhance our own operating model. And I would say ultimately, our business users, as I'm sure we'd all agree, they should be able to trust the data and use it confidently, and it's there to help them inform important decision making, and importantly for us at Nationwide, limit the data risk and impact.
Yeah. I think just to add to that as well, while working on a variety of projects as well, they're also getting the buy-in and they understand how we work. So it's easier for them to also possibly accept the ways we are working and incorporate that. So we haven't got that clash sometimes. Just working in variety of companies, various projects, you quite often have this clash. Okay, so this is them, this is us. We are doing this because we trust the way we do, and somebody wants to do in a way they trust. Whereas working in that new way, the third parties seem to be very easily adapt what we need, and we also quite understanding on what they can, what are their capabilities, because there are some points that they possibly cannot make differently. So we find those align ourselves, and again making sure that we work as a team rather than being siloed places, and obviously that value of having that good networking relationship, it delivers the value in the project because there are less conflicts. Yeah. It's yes,
and it for me, it's about how we position our story presents the best value for those consumers, those business users, our auditors, for example. It's helping them understand our broader service offering against the data and bringing those two together to make them more aligned.
Yeah.
So for me, one of the things I think is fantastic is hearing two really, really good best practices in action. I think one, which is the focus on value, because clearly, value means different things to different people, whether it be internally or externally. So focusing on what value means to people and how they achieve it. But actually storytelling, that is so important, but it's also incredibly powerful, because you can do the best things in the world, but if people don't understand it and what its relevance is to them,
then ultimately, you're going to struggle with getting that value. So I think there's a couple of really good practices that Sam talked about there, particularly around value, and then about the storytelling that goes around it. Fantastic examples.
And it's just to add on that, Andrew, it's interesting. We've not always got that right. We've got work to do in that space on our storytelling, and that's what we're on that journey right now. And if previously, if I think back historically to years ago, within my, the team, the governance team, we talk very much about metadata management, our services. We're going to capture the data, we're going to define the data, and we're going to put an owner against the data. Data profiling over here, we're going to profile the data. We talked in these very siloed services, and our business users, we'd show them models, and our business users would kind of look at us and say, I don't understand. So this is that turnaround now of, it's not kind of rocket science, isn't it? It's just about telling a better story to help inform those decisions.
Yeah, and Sam, you're right. And it's also, explaining to them the impact of the data, right? The story, yep, this is what we're doing, this is why, and this is how it impacts. And then people kind of buy into that. And there is, you cannot really force a discipline onto any business organization and expect, a very smooth journey. But by getting people to buy in, you then see that they understand and they see why they are doing that. And then there's a much better collaboration. So it's a perfect example of how you get teams to work together.
Thanks, everyone. Really insightful. We've got one more question to ask if we can. So you've talked obviously about the value and to the business and to the wider organization, but what about behaviors? How are your colleagues and the people that you work with adopting and seeing these new ways of working around data governance? It's always an issue in my experience.
Yeah, so if I start from within our own governance team, new ways of working that I've touched on earlier have really allowed colleagues to deep dive into other teams' processes and identify wins and efficiencies and look at building in new solutions or options of how we deliver. So I think that's quite refreshing and a key shift. And we're learning also more about healthy challenge. Why do we, by bringing teams together, metadata specialists, DQ specialists, doing that cross-skill piece, it's allowing people to kind of question, well, why do we do it that way? Just because we've done it that way for years. Is it an opportunity now to mix it up a little bit? Why can't we try X? And did you know we could use Y, for example? And also reaching out and tapping into existing stakeholder relationships that many of these siloed teams have, and bringing those siloed teams together has allowed this to happen and create that more conducive environment. And I think our approach to working with the business has changed. Having brought our teams together in our governance operations delivery space, we're now approaching new demand requests with a more focused end-to-end governance delivery mindset, where in the past demand, as I touched on earlier, demand was treated through many inception routes across data marketplace and governance. Managing that demand, very tricky and dealt with by siloed teams. So we weren't looking at the bigger context and the bigger picture and the value add of what we could produce for our business users. So absolutely less siloed with, stopping and preventing historical team, impact assessing and providing very almost isolated governance recommendations. And it's helped us, I would say, identify more broadly those dependencies and the give-gets, as I think Sri you touched on earlier. It's allowing us to really triage and impact assess much earlier on in our engagement process. And this, I feel, is the biggest wins for our team and clearly for our business users. And it's helping us focus on what services are required and the drive to more efficiently deliver them. Yeah.
What I love about the new ways of working, and Sam mentioned that we started asking the questions. We do have a really good debates within the team now and across the team. So yes, so we are lucky to have Sam in being really good facilitator, because opinions sometimes are really strong and you discuss, but that usually brings really good solutions otherwise we wouldn't have had. So, if we were just stuck in those little silos, we would just have that little scope of, okay, these are our tools. This is what we are talking about. Whereas now we discovered a number of new tools, a number of the ways that other teams are doing, and they're possibly doing much better, which we can adapt within our teams now. We also, what I found, that we see much wider picture. We see not only what we're doing within our area, but also how our area fits into delivering value to actually members. And this, what I found while working when you work in technology operation, you don't necessarily see that immediate impact. It's not the same like if you work face to face with the members. And now when we are crossing those boundaries, we actually see very clearly how we manage, how we helped to support our frontline colleagues as well.
Now, I was just going to make a point on what Sam said. The cross-border teams, right? We always kind of looked at governance or data management by business function. So we look at what does finance do with customer data? We govern it. What does sales and marketing do? What does supply chain do, or customer service do? But in reality, it's an end-to-end process. And like you said, you then see the interfaces between the different functions. You see how your work impacts somebody else, or somebody else's work impacts you, and then you're able to look at it in a more what I would say objective way and say, can it be improved? And it's interesting, you said it's the way it's always been done before. That's not really true. A joke that reminds me of a joke from a BBC sitcom where somebody says to the prime minister, that's the way it has been done for the last 300 years. And another person pipes up and says, no, 200 years back, it was only the way that was done for 200 years. 100 years back, it was only the way that it was done for 100 years. And even before that, it was new. So it isn't always necessary to say, yes, that's the way it's always been done. Because your business requirements, your business scenarios change, and you need to look at what is the optimum way. Like today, with all the regulatory governance and the value that data today has value, not a commodity, means there has to be a different way of looking at how you source the data, how you manage it, how you use it, and how you govern it. So that's an interesting point. That's the way it's always been done. Never worked.
And the shift in end-to-end data governance delivery and partnering with our business users, really, really important for us. And it also helps us to prioritize as well, and also clearly create efficiencies where we talked about the gives and gets and dependencies and identifying them hopefully much earlier on, and doing that less waterfall approach, which I touched on earlier.
Yeah, and that's also the point I made earlier on in my presentation. It now also is, governance includes who's using the data and for what. It's no more that, yes, I just govern the data, but if it's being propagated to a downstream system or anywhere else, who are the users accessing it and what purpose? So that's where you protect your data and you govern it. And it's similar to currency. You want to know who's using it and for what purpose. So you want to prevent anything illegal, right?
And one of the things I loved about what you were saying, Harina, was this idea of the connection between what you guys are doing from a governance viewpoint, but how it all ripples its way out to your members, your customers, the people at the end of this. So the connection between what you do and what it means to ultimately your customer. I think when you have that kind of line of sight, it just makes it so much easier for people to understand why you're doing this and what the impact's going to be. And when people get the impact, lots of these things that you're doing, you talk about kind of mixing things up a bit, it all becomes easier because people can go, I get why we're doing this. Fantastic story.
Thank you all for your contribution and insights today. And as I said at the very start, data governance is more than just policing.
I hope everyone's managed to take away some good learnings from this session. Sadly, it's all we've got time for today, but do join us again tomorrow where we've got Sainsbury's, joined by Snowflake, talking about how they're bringing the business and technical worlds together to break down silos across Sainsbury's. Until then, I've been Natalie Williams.
And I've been Andy Gould.
See you tomorrow.